after 17 years in the military, 3 deployments. I think the worst thing about PTSD that you're not going to read anywhere is that PTSD lies to you. It makes you think that you're something that you're not. It makes you forget who you were. There was a time when I actually liked going to war. I felt at home there, like it was where I was meant to be. And when people asked me what war was like, I felt like I was supposed to tell them what they expected to hear. War is hell, war sucks, war is a nightmare. Well, that's really not how I felt about war. To me, war became this ultimate adventure. And even though I was going to new places, fighting became the thread that pulled it all together. It was familiar. I knew how to cope with it, how to win, how to adapt. When I wasn't in war, coping to everyday life was a challenge, and I didn't feel like myself. For a very long time, I felt like war was the only place where I could feel like myself, where I could feel who I was inside. It became harder to be normal or feel like myself when not in combat. No matter where I was, I always felt this call to go back. You cling to these habits from combat because you've been trained to think that they keep you safe. But in reality, they're putting you in danger. I spent close to 2 years with a therapist, learning how to heal myself after being diagnosed with PTSD. In that time, I've learned how it can affect your life without you even realizing it. How it changes you for the worse. You see, it physically rewires your brain. Think of PTSD as a mismanagement of files. In certain traumatic situations, you develop coping mechanisms that keep you alive. And what's bad about those methods of coping is that in most cases, you kind of get stuck with them. And it usually gets worse over time. To treat PTSD with cognitive therapy, you have to learn how to reprocess those memories. You have to put the files in the right place, else you'll suffer the consequences. For me, PTSD was never about reliving previous events. It was never about what had happened in the past. I never had a nightmare about a deployment, never had what people would call a flashback of a deployment. But I was always on edge. I was always expecting something to happen. And I felt like if I gave that mechanism up, that whenever I would deploy again in the future, that I would somehow not come back because I had given up that way of thinking or of processing everything around me. And so I was always easily irritated. I was always quick to anger. Untreated PTSD is like sitting in a pool that slowly fills up with water. For a while, you can stand it. There may be some small ripples in the water at first, and they don't really pose any danger. The threat of drowning really isn't present. Yet over time, the water starts to rise, and soon enough, you're forced to tread water. This works for a while. However, you eventually begin to tire. And in desperation, you reach out for devices that keep you afloat. For most of us, these are all the wrong devices. And slowly the ripples become waves and crash over your head. You lose the fight to stay afloat, and you begin to sink at a steady rate. Alcohol, drugs, avoidance, hyperarousal, or staying on edge, these devices aren't keeping you afloat. These aren't life jackets, they're weights. And before you know it, you sunk to the bottom. Now, the bottom can be many things for many people. It can be depression, anxiety, insomnia, drug abuse, alcoholism, isolation, and even suicide. All are the products of coping mechanisms meant to distract you from confronting the memories head on. All meant to keep you away from healing yourself and becoming the best version of who you really are. Here at the bottom, you've damaged nearly all of the relationships that have meant anything to you. In the beginning, loved ones have offered to keep your head above the crashing waves, and your pride has refused their efforts or pushed them away entirely. At the bottom, you find yourself alone. Nothing but you and whatever devices you've latched yourself onto. You struggle to get to the surface, but the weight is too much. You're trapped, stuck at the bottom. At the bottom, you have two choices. Succumb to the pressure of the depths of PTSD and continue to drown, or cut loose the weights gripping you and swim to the surface as if your life depends on it. And I can tell you your life does depend on it. The coping skills that were once the truths to surviving combat are now the lies trapping you at the bottom.